Amelia stood in front of the mirror. Her wedding dress was beautiful, white, soft, and full of little shiny beads. Her hair was done. Her makeup was light, just enough to glow. She looked like a bride, but inside, she didn't feel happy. Her heart felt heavy, like something was sitting on her chest. She tried to smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. Grace, her best friend, walked over and smiled wide. "Amelia, you look so beautiful, like a real queen." Amelia smiled a little. "Thank you." Grace looked at her closely. "Are you okay?" Amelia took a breath. "I think so. Just nervous." But that wasn't the whole truth. She didn't feel ready. She hadn't known Daniel for very long. They met a few months ago. He was smart, kind, and always said the right things. When he asked her to marry him, she wasn't sure. But her mother kept saying, "Good men don't wait forever, and you need to settle down. You are not getting any younger." So she said yes. Now, here she was, wearing the dress, getting ready to walk down the aisle. But her heart didn't feel sure. Grace handed her a glass of water. "You're just scared. That's normal. Every bride feels that way." Amelia nodded. "Yeah, maybe." But deep inside, something didn't feel right, and that feeling wouldn't go away. Her fiancé, Daniel, was not born rich. He came from a simple, middle-class family like Amelia's. But over the last few years, something changed. Daniel became rich, very rich. He told people he was into tech, that he had started something online that took off. No one really understood what he did, but the money was real. Expensive car, new house, designer clothes. He had it all. His mother, Margaret, was proud of him, extremely proud. She walked with her head high, always talking about how Daniel was now one of the top young men in their town. Self-made, she would say with pride. Smart, driven, successful. And because of that, she believed Daniel deserved someone just as high level as he had become. She didn't think that person was Amelia. From the very beginning, Margaret gave Amelia cold smiles and backhanded compliments. She never said anything loud or rude in front of people, but her words still cut deep. "She seems nice," Margaret once said with a forced smile. "But I just hope she can grow into this lifestyle. Daniel's world is different now." It didn't stop there. Amelia remembered it clearly. She wore a bright dress full of color. Her family danced, sang, and brought gifts. They were proud and happy. They came with love, joy, music, and culture. They danced, laughed, and honored their roots. Amelia's father gave a heartfelt speech. Her mother smiled with pride. But Daniel's family sat stiff and quiet. They whispered among themselves. Margaret looked unimpressed the whole time. Later, Amelia heard her speaking to two women from her side. "She's sweet," Margaret said, "but it's clear she comes from a different kind of home. Their ways are not like ours. That is what you get when you marry someone from a different tribe." One of the women nodded. "Yes," loud. "But this isn't how we do things. It's a bit too unrefined. I'm not sure she fits." "She'll have to learn," Margaret added. "Daniel needs someone who matches his level now, not someone he has to carry. He could have had any girl from our tribe. She is lucky he chose her." Amelia stood nearby, out of sight, holding her breath. Her eyes burned. Her heart broke a little more. That night, she told Daniel what she had heard. "She doesn't mean it like that," Daniel said quickly. "My mom just worries." "About what?" Amelia asked. "That I'm not rich enough? That my family doesn't match yours?" Daniel sighed and looked at his phone. "Just let it go, please. We're almost at the wedding. Can we not do this now?" He never defended her, not once. In the days before the wedding, Amelia felt Daniel slipping further away. He stopped calling as much. When she called him, he was short, distracted, always in a rush, always handling something. She tried to tell herself he was just stressed, that once the wedding was over, things would go back to normal. But deep down she knew something was wrong, and nobody wanted to talk about it. Amelia stood by the door of her room. It was almost time to walk into the event hall and begin the ceremony. Her heart was beating fast. Her palms were sweating. Grace had just gone ahead to help organize the flower girls. Amelia needed a moment alone. She took a deep breath and reached for the door handle. Just as she stepped out into the hallway, she heard voices around the corner. Two men were talking quietly. She recognized one of them. It was one of Daniel's groomsmen. The other voice she didn't know, but it sounded older. "She's pretty," the older man said. "Yeah," the groomsman replied. "But you know Daniel. He's not ready to settle down. He just wants to look responsible. He says this girl, Emilia, is the perfect pick. Conservative, quiet, won't poke her nose where she shouldn't." The other man laughed. "Wow." "Exactly," the groomsman said. "Once this is done, they'll back off." Emilia froze. Her heart felt like it stopped. What were they talking about? Who were they? Why would Daniel say that? She backed away quietly before they could see her. She waved it off as just gossip. Daniel wouldn't say something like that. She didn't understand what it meant, not fully, but it didn't feel right. Nothing about it did. A few minutes later, the music began to play. The doors opened and everyone stood. Emilia walked down the aisle. The room was full, but it felt empty. She looked around. Some guests smiled, but many of Daniel's family looked away. Some stared without warmth. Margaret didn't smile at all. Her face was blank, cold. Daniel stood at the front wearing a clean suit. He looked handsome, but not excited. He didn't look at Emilia until she was right in front of him. And when he did, it wasn't with love, it was like he was sizing her. "You look good," he said softly. "Thank you," Emilia whispered, trying to keep her voice from shaking. The ceremony began. The pastor spoke. Vows were read, but Emilia felt numb, like she was watching herself from far away. Then came the part Emilia had been waiting for. "Now, the couple will jump the broom," the pastor said. Emilia turned to Daniel with a soft smile. "It's a tradition in my family. We've done it for generations." Daniel looked at the broom placed gently in front of them. Then he scoffed. "I'm not doing that." Emilia's face fell. "Why not? It means a lot to me." "It looks silly," Daniel said, not even lowering his voice. "We don't need to do all this backward stuff." "It's not silly," Emilia said, quietly but firmly. "It's part of my culture. My parents, my grandparents, they all did this. It's important to me." Daniel shook his head. "Let's just move on. This isn't the time for this kind of thing." The pastor looked unsure. Guests whispered. Emilia stood still, her heart breaking quiet. In that moment, she realized something. He didn't respect her, not her family, not her culture, not her. But a small voice told her she might just be overthinking things and he might not mean it like that. After a few minutes, that was over and they all headed to the hall. The reception hall was beautiful. Golden lights hung from the ceiling. Flowers filled every table. The air smelled like roses and soft perfume. Music played in the background, and guests laughed and clinked glasses. But Emilia didn't feel like a bride. She stood near the entrance, watching everyone. People came to hug her, say congratulations and smile for pictures, but none of it felt real. Daniel was across the room, not beside her, not holding her hand. He was near the bar, whispering again with the same man she had overheard before the ceremony. The man who said Daniel just wanted to look responsible. Every time Emilia looked his way, Daniel was on his phone, texting, checking something, laughing quietly. Not once did he turn to check on her. Grace came over and handed Emilia a drink. "You okay?" Emilia gave a weak smile. "I feel like I don't belong here." Before Grace could answer, the DJ tapped the microphone. "Everyone, please welcome the groom's mother, Margaret, for a few words." Margaret stood slowly, holding her glass of wine. Her smile was wide, but her eyes were sharp. The room grew quiet. "I just want to thank everyone for coming today," she began. "Today is special. My son Daniel has always been a man of vision, a hard worker, a builder, and now he has taken another bold step." She turned slightly and looked at Emilia. "It takes strength and courage to marry someone from a different background, someone with different customs. But Daniel has always had a generous heart. He's always been open-minded, willing to give others a chance, even when they come from worlds far from his own." There was a pause. The room was silent. Some guests shifted in their seats. Emilia felt her chest tighten. Her throat went dry. She looked at Daniel, hoping he would say something, anything. But he just stared at his glass. Quiet. He didn't look up. He didn't defend her. He let his mother say those things in front of everyone. The applause was small, a few claps here and there, mostly silence. Grace reached out and held Amelia's hand. Amelia squeezed it hard to keep from crying. She had never felt more alone. The wedding cake stood tall in the center of the hall, 4 layers of smooth white icing decorated with gold lines and soft pink flowers. A small crowd gathered around as the music slowed and the lights dimmed. It was time for the cake cutting. Amelia stood beside Daniel. She tried to smile for the camera, but her heart was tired. Her cheeks hurt from fake smiles. Her chest felt tight from holding in so many feelings. Then Daniel's cousin, Lillian, took the mic. Lillian was the one who had baked the cake. She wore a bright green dress and a proud smile. She cleared her throat and looked around. "I just want to say how proud I am to be part of this beautiful celebration," she said. "This cake, like this marriage, is built on love, support, and family." People nodded. Then her voice changed. "Some families give gifts, some help with planning, and some just show up to enjoy. But hey," she smiled, "we all play our part, right?" A few people laughed quietly. Some looked away. Amelia froze. She felt the words hit her like a slap. She looked around. Eyes darted. Whispers grew. Her family. Her parents. They had tried their best. They gave what they could. They had love, not money, but now they were being mocked, for everyone to hear. Amelia turned to Daniel, her voice low and shaking. "Did you hear that?" Daniel didn't meet her eyes. "It's nothing, just a joke." "No, it's not," Amelia said. "It was disrespectful. And you're just going to let her say that?" Daniel sighed. "Can we not do this here? You're making a scene." Amelia stepped back. "A scene? Your mother insults me. Your cousin mocks my family, and you say nothing. I'm tired of this." Daniel put down his drink. His face was tight. "Stop, this isn't the time." "No," Amelia said, louder now. "If you won't do anything, then I will. I will not keep letting your family humiliate me." Before she could finish, Daniel's hand flew up. He slapped her. "Enough!" Daniel shouted. The sound echoed through the room. The music stopped. People gasped. The hall fell into silence. Amelia stood still, her hand on her cheek. It burned, not just from the slap, but from the shame. Tears filled her eyes, but she did not let them fall. She looked at Daniel. His face was pale, shocked by what he had done. She looked at the guests. Every eye was on her. She took a step back, then turned to the crowd. Her voice was steady. "This wedding is over." Her cheek burning, her heart pounding. The silence in the hall was thick. Everyone stared. Some mouths hung open. Some eyes were wide in shock. Some guests already had their phones out. Daniel just stood there. He didn't move. He didn't reach for her. He didn't even say, "I'm sorry." And that told Amelia everything she needed to know. She turned and walked over to the DJ's stand. The man looked unsure, but Amelia held out her hand. "Give me the mic," she said, her voice calm. He handed it to her. She turned to face the crowd, people who had smiled at her, clapped for her, and now sat frozen in place. She took a breath and began. "I should have walked away sooner," she said, her voice clear and strong. "I should have listened to the feeling in my chest, the voice in my heart. But I didn't. I ignored every sign, every insult, every cold look." Her voice didn't shake, not once. "I thought love meant staying, that being a good woman meant keeping quiet. I was wrong." She looked at Daniel. He still didn't speak. He didn't move. "I want every woman watching me now to hear this. You are not here to be silent. You are not here to be stepped on. You are not here to please someone who doesn't value you. Walk away before it's too late." She took off her wedding ring, held it in her hand for a second. Then she placed it on the table beside her. "I choose me. I choose peace. I choose freedom." The hall stayed silent. Then she handed the mic back and walked out. Her head was high. Her back was straight. She didn't cry. Not yet. Outside the doors, the air was cool. It hit her face like a hug. Her heels clicked against the ground as she walked toward the parking lot. "Amelia!" Grace called, running after her. Amelia stopped. Grace wrapped her arms around her tightly. "You're so strong.
I'm so proud of you." Then Amelia's mother appeared, her eyes filled with tears. "My daughter," she said softly, holding her close. "You did the right thing. Let's go home." Amelia nodded. She was still shaking inside, but she knew she was safe now. Safe from them, safe from him, and finally, free.
Later that night, Amelia sat curled up on Grace's couch, wrapped in a soft blanket. Her wedding dress was gone, replaced by one of Grace's old t-shirts and a pair of loose trousers. Her hair was messy, her face bare, but for the first time in hours, she felt safe. Grace brought her a warm cup of tea and sat beside her. "You don't have to talk, just rest." Amelia nodded. Her body was tired, her heart even more so. Then her phone buzzed, and buzzed again. And again. She ignored it. She didn't want to hear from anyone, not now. But Grace's phone started to ring too. Then another buzz. Then a message popped up on the screen. Grace picked it up. Her eyes went wide. "Oh my God." Amelia turned to her. "What is it?" "It's everywhere," Grace whispered. She turned the screen toward Amelia. There it was. A video. The slap. The silence. Amelia taking the mic. Her speech, the moment she walked away. Posted on every major platform. Shared by blogs, influencers, news outlets. Millions of views. People were outraged. Comments poured in. "This is heartbreaking, she deserves so much better. He hit her in public. Imagine what he's like in private. That speech, that strength, I'm crying. Expose this man." Amelia sat back, shocked. Her private pain was now the world's story. Across town, Daniel's name was trending, but not in the way he had always dreamed. The man who once bragged about his clean image was now being called a coward, an abuser, a fraud. TV reporters picked up the story. Bloggers posted timelines of events. Hashtags spread like wildfire. #justice for Amelia, #walk away with dignity. People started digging into Daniel's past, asking questions. Who was this man really? What else was he hiding? Amelia didn't know whether to cry or scream. She just sat there, holding the warm mug in her hand, eyes staring at the screen. "Are you okay?" Grace asked gently. Amelia looked up. "I don't know," she said honestly. "But maybe, just maybe, this was never meant to stay hidden." A few days had passed since the wedding that never truly was. Amelia stayed at Grace's place. She needed time to breathe, to sleep, to think. Some days she didn't even speak. Other days she wrote in her journal, trying to make sense of everything. The internet hadn't let go of the story. New clips, reactions, and articles kept coming. Amelia tried to ignore most of it, but one morning Grace rushed into the living room, phone in hand. "Amelia," she said out of breath, "you need to see this." Amelia sat up slowly. "What is it?" Grace handed her the phone. Breaking news. Daniel Okoro arrested in connection with major online scam ring. Amelia stared at the headline. Her fingers trembled. She scrolled down. Daniel had been arrested at his home by financial crimes investigators. The report said he had been running a large-scale internet scam, tricking people through fake websites, investment traps, and identity theft. Dozens of victims. Millions of dollars. His so-called tech company? A front. It was just a cover for laundering stolen money. Fake offices, paid actors, made-up clients, all of it part of an image, a lie. And the wedding. That, too, was part of the plan. One line in the article hit Amelia hardest. Sources close to the case say Daniel attempted to present himself as a stable, married man to weaken suspicion and avoid charges. Amelia dropped the phone. Suddenly, it all made sense. The quiet phone calls. The constant presence of that older man, his business partner. The whisper she overheard at the wedding. He just wants to look responsible. Once this is done, they'll back off. He didn't love her. He used her, not just for image, but as a shield. A woman to stand beside him, quiet, loyal, non-threatening. And when she dared to speak, he hit her. Grace sat beside her, gently taking her hand. "You see now," she whispered. "This wasn't your fault. You didn't miss something. You were played by someone dangerous." Later that day, A photo surfaced. Margaret, Daniel's proud mother, standing outside their home as police led him away. Her eyes were red, her mouth tight. For once, she had nothing to say. The woman who once looked down on Amelia was now being asked questions by reporters, hiding her face behind a scarf. She had told everyone Amelia wasn't worthy, but now the world could see. The shame belonged to her son. A week later, Amelia stood in her family's compound. The sky was soft with evening light, and chairs were set in a half circle. Her uncles, aunts, cousins, and neighbors gathered quietly. They weren't there to celebrate a wedding. They were there to close a chapter. On a small tray sat the returned bride price, envelopes of money, wrappers, small gifts. All of it was placed neatly, waiting for someone from Daniel's side to collect it. No one came. The table across from them sat empty. Margaret and the rest of Daniel's family had been invited. But after the arrest, the trial, the shame, they stayed away. Daniel's case had moved fast. The evidence was clear. Documents, messages, fake company records. Everything was there. He was found guilty, sentenced to 20 years in prison. Every car, house, account seized by the Financial Crimes Unit. His image, once clean and sharp, was now dirtied beyond repair. Margaret had gone silent. The woman who once looked down on Amelia now hid from the world. Her neighbors whispered, her friends avoided her. Amelia watched as her uncle stood, lifted the bride price tray, and handed it to a local elder. The elder nodded, and the return was made official. No one clapped. There was no music. But there was peace. Later that night, Amelia and her mother sat outside under a tree. The air was cool, quiet. Her mother held her hand and looked at her with soft eyes. "I'm sorry," she said. Amelia turned to her. "For what?" "For rushing you, for pushing you. I thought I was doing the right thing. I just wanted you to have someone, to be taken care of." "I know," Amelia whispered. Her mother looked away, then back. "But I forgot that in the end, you are the one who has to live with the man. Not me, not anyone else. From now on, I won't pressure you anymore." Amelia nodded. Her eyes filled with tears. But this time they were soft ones. Not from pain, but from love. "I'll wait," her mother said, "for the right one, with you." And in that moment, Amelia felt something deep inside her begin to heal. It had been months since the wedding that never was. Amelia now lived in a small but cozy apartment not far from Grace's. The walls were soft yellow, the curtains light and airy. Her days were quiet, peaceful, healing. She was still shaken by everything that had happened. Sometimes she woke up from dreams that left her heart racing. Sometimes she heard echoes of voices that once made her feel small. But each morning she reminded herself, you walked away. You saved yourself. One evening, Amelia sat on her small balcony. A warm breeze blew through her hair. In her lap lay an old leather-bound journal, one she hadn't touched in years. She opened it slowly and began to write. "Today, I chose me. Not just once, but every day since I walked away. I didn't just escape a wedding. I escaped a life that would have crushed my soul, and I'm not ashamed. I'm proud." She wrote about the signs she ignored. She wrote about the slap. She wrote about the silence. She wrote about the voice she found again. When she was done, she showed the pages to Grace. Grace read in silence, then looked up with tears in her eyes. "Amelia, this is not just a journal. This is a book." Amelia laughed. "A book?" "Yes," Grace said. "You have no idea how many women need to hear this. How many feel stuck, afraid, quiet. Your story can give them a way out." At first, Amelia wasn't sure, but Grace helped her. Together, they typed up the pages. They found a publisher, and not long after, the book came out. I Walked Away, A True Story of Courage and Freedom, by Amelia Osei. And it didn't take long before it became a bestseller. People around the world wrote to her. Messages of love, hope, and strength filled her inbox. Some said her story saved their lives as many people in abusive marriages began to speak up. Not just women, but men also trapped in emotionally abusive marriages. Amelia sat in her living room one afternoon holding a fresh copy of her book, her name on the cover, her truth in every word. She smiled. She wasn't the girl in the wedding dress anymore. She was the woman who chose herself, the woman who turned her pain into purpose.